Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Dr. Hakim Rashid, and welcome to Islamic Teaching Methods. This course has 5 primary objectives. First of all, we want to examine the teaching process in the context of the Quran and the Sunnah. Secondly, we want to examine the role of teachers in Muslim child development. Third, we want to provide an Islamic perspective on Western theories of teaching and learning. Fourth, we want to explore Islamic strategies of classroom management. And our 5th objective is to examine innovative strategies of teaching Muslim children. We're going to handle this in a kind of a 10-segment process. First of all, we're going to define Islamic education. We're going to spend some time talking about the teaching methodology of the Quran. We'll spend an extensive amount of time talking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a teacher. And we want to spend a segment talking about the Islamic demeanor of the Muslim teacher. We want to talk about teachers and Muslim child development. Spend some time examining the whole issue of the development of the Muslim child, the normal development of the Muslim child. We're going to spend some time talking about Islamic perspective on Western theories of teaching and learning. And then we're going to look at Islamic strategies of classroom management. We'll then talk about innovative strategies of teaching Muslim children, and we'll close out the class by asking the question, is there an ideal Muslim teacher? And with that, we'll be finished. First of all, we want to talk about what the Quran says about the importance of education. Many of you may have read the article that we sent out earlier on the role of schools in Islamic society, written by Dr. Munir Al-Otaibi and myself. And we wanted to kind of set the tone for that article by looking at these 3 verses from the Quran. First of all, from Surah 58 ayat 11, Allah will raise up to suitable ranks and degrees those of you who believe and have been granted knowledge. From Surah 39 ayat 9, Allah says, say, are those equal, those who know and those who do not know? And from Surah 16 ayat 43, if you realize this not, ask of those who possess the message. And from Surah 24 ayat 144, O my Lord, increase me in knowledge. Again, if we look at these and other ayats in their totality, we see obviously that the Quran places a tremendous importance on the whole notion of education and the acquisition of knowledge. It's important as we talk about Islamic teaching methods that we take a historical look, that we take that broad view of Islamic history. We can go back to the first school in Islam, which was the Prophet's masjid. And Dr. Al-Otaibi and I, we took a look at those early Islamic institutions. We felt that it was important that we draw whatever lessons that we could from those early Islamic institutions and recognize that those laid the foundations for all of Islamic education that would come afterwards. The role of the Prophet's mosque or masjid as the first school in the Islamic State laid a strong foundation for the development of Muslim schools and schools and universities in succeeding generations. It was a comprehensive institution that served as the center of the Muslim social, political, economic, judicial, and educational life. So that masjid, that institution, It was a comprehensive institution. It was the first real school in the Muslim Ummah. Now, what was the teacher's role in these early Islamic schools? In the early years of Islam, teachers performed their roles voluntarily only for the sake of Allah. Those who were qualified to teach came to the masjid, to the mosque, to teach students virtually any subject at any time. They were appreciated because their motives for teaching were noble and pure. However, as Islam spread and Muslims came into contact with foreign cultures, teaching as a solely voluntary vocation became impossible. Teaching eventually took its place among the professions, and teachers received salaries for performing their roles. We see a parallel here in terms of what's going on within the Muslim Ummah in America. In many situations, we have teachers who are performing their roles voluntarily. They're coming in, they're performing their teaching duties as sadaqah. They're not getting paid. But as our institutions grow and develop, as we begin to serve more children, as we begin to take a look at the comprehensive needs of Muslim children, then those roles of teachers have to change. They have to transform or be transformed into something much more sophisticated. Now, in terms of curriculum and methodology, again, as we look at those early institutions, from the beginning, Islamic education used the Quran and the Sunnah as its foundation and source of direction. In the early period of Islam, the focus of attention was on the religious subjects, such as the Quran, the tafsir or interpretation of the Quran, and the hadith. However, as the Islamic State expanded and Muslims interacted with other cultures, especially from a historical standpoint in the Abbasid period or era, the disciplines such as medicine, mathematics, and philosophy were introduced. These were known as the ulum aqliya, or the sciences of religion, as opposed to the ulum ad-din, or the sciences of religion. Now, again, we see an evolutionary process taking place, a movement from strictly religious knowledge, a focus on the hadith, a focus on the Quran, and an evolution into the sciences that were needed to develop civilization. Now, it's important for us to recognize that the teaching methods that were used in the early Islamic institutions were probably some of the most progressive methods that were used throughout the world. Quite often we've been given this view of education in the Muslim world as archaic, as somehow behind the times, so to speak. But when we really examine that history, when we strip away the influence of colonialism and the domination of other cultures, in Muslim lands, what we find is a very progressive set of educational methods. Teaching methods in the Islamic educational system depended upon the age of the students. For younger students, more attention was given to student attitudes and individual differences. While rote memorization was used, approaches such as reading aloud, reading stories about historical figures and events, and learning through play were all used by Muslim teachers.